Hi, welcome to 21 Cubed. The Bridge welcomes you to join with us on a 21-day journey through the book of John. Day 6, John 6. So this chapter opens up with a spotlight on Jesus' disciples crossing the Sea of Galilee. It says they crossed because they had a huge crowd following them wherever they went. The chapter later explains the people wanted Jesus to be their king, in verse 14, and Jesus knew that this wasn't God's plan for him, so he was really just trying to avoid becoming king. Now, the chapter doesn't come out and say what time of day it is in this passage, but I'm imagining it being sometime in the early morning part of the day. Here's why. It says that only the men were counted, and they totaled 5,000 in verse 10. They did not account for women and children who were in the crowd as well. I would imagine there being more around 12 to 15,000 in the crowd that day. All that to say, when was the last time you tried feeding 12 to 15,000 people, and how long do you think that would take? So now we start to look at something that is a very common story in the church. Jesus here feeds all these people with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish given to him by a boy. This kid had a lunch his loving mother had made for him and was kind enough to share it with Jesus. How cool is that? A kid saw the need, realized he had the means to help, and gave everything. A kid gives more than anyone else there. Most writers would focus on how Jesus prays and feeds everyone and picks up the leftovers. I want to focus on what he did directly after this. In verse 15, it says, "He slipped away into the hills by himself." Jesus just fed and ministered to thousands of people, and the first thing he does is get away to be by himself. He needed to spend time with God. He needed to hear from the Father and be fed and ministered to himself. Now, the next verse gives us a time of day. In the evening, the disciples still hadn't seen Jesus, so they got in the boat and started across the lake. The Sea of Galilee is really just a large lake, not even the size of even one of our Great Lakes. About halfway through the lake, a storm shook the water and the boat violently. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to go out on a boat, much less late at night, but I've been out on the water multiple times on all-night fishing tournaments, and let me tell you, if it gets stormy, it's not a fun place to be. John, the assumed author of the story, here confirms my thoughts by saying they were terrified in verse 19. This is when Jesus finally comes out to them, walking on water and telling them just to chill out. He says, "Don't be afraid." He was the peace they needed. There are many more stories in this chapter that are absolutely amazing, but I want to focus on these 2 for today. There's something I want to point out, sort of the key things I see in these verses that I believe will prove to be invaluable to all of us. The first is Jesus spent time alone with God. He needed to be alone with God, so how much more do we need to be alone with him? Jesus took this time just to pray and commune with God. The second thing is Jesus says he is the peace we need. He says, "I am here," in verse 20. If you're reading this now on the 6th day of our journey and still thinking, "I still don't see God moving. I don't feel him here with me," let me assure you, Jesus, the King of all kings, is right next to you, desiring nothing more than just to talk with you and spend time with you. He will be the peace you need today. All you have to do is find the alone time to be with him. So do that today. Take the time to be in his presence and talk with him. Tell him what you're thinking. Thank him for all he's done in your life. Then I urge you to take a while and just be quiet. Listen to what he says back. Know that he is your peace today and every day.